Well, I guess it's close enough to 7:30. We can give it a start. This will be the last time I do this season because Chuck LaChuse is coming back in April and he will do those beautiful Buffalo architectural slides that he does. I've been kind of filling in for him when he's in Florida. But I have more programs we can do next winter also. So that's the problem with being a historian, you never can quit. I did these for the Historical Society originally and a number of places elsewhere, churches and so on. This one I did about 20 years ago, and this week I've got some more pictures and updated it. So we'll start out with the fact that Niagara Falls is world famous, of course, not only for its falls and botanical gardens and so on, it's also famous for its innovative engineering for bridges. Several of the bridges in Niagara Falls, Niagara Gorge, have been among the earliest of its type, and we'll talk about some of that a little bit later on. Is my voice clear enough? Everybody can hear all right? Okay, good. I hope it holds out for the whole evening. Okay, let's go one. It all started with an idea, actually, with a man who was instrumental for the Welland Canal, and William Hamilton Merritt, who gave his name, of course, to the city of Hamilton. But he thought it would be a good idea if there was some way to get to Canada besides by boat. Previous to this time, all the traffic to Canada or back was by either rowboat or when they got steamships like the Maid of the Mist, by that route. And they had to find a good area where the water wouldn't overturn the boat, obviously. They scratched their heads about how to get across a line to the other side so they could start on the bridge. And so what they came up with was a kite flying contest. An American boy on the Canadian side, after they tried all the time during the first day, it didn't work. On the second day, he was able to land his kite on the American side, even though he was on the Canadian side. And with that string, they attached a small rope, took that across, and then eventually worked their way up to an actual cable. And so that's how, back in 1847, they got the first area set up to develop the first suspension bridge. Suspension bridges were fairly new at that time, too. This suspension bridge would be fairly small. It was really designed for pedestrians and perhaps a light carriage. But by 1848, on August 1st, they actually opened that first bridge. And let's get the next picture. But in the process of building it, they had a basket. And because the engineer who initiated this was named Allett, this was called Allett's basket. Now, I'll try to point it out. It's not a very big picture here. There we are. Now, Allett's basket, incidentally, you can see the actual basket down in the Buffalo History Museum. They have it down there, they're on display. But when they began construction, they had the basket available for weekends. So people were interested in crossing. Not men, but women. They had a steady flow of women who crossed on the Allett basket for $1 to go across. Most men were a bit afraid. I hate to use that word, but they were hesitant. In fact, one couple I know of, I don't actually know them, but I read about one couple, he sent his wife across at Allett's basket. He went down to Niagara Falls and crossed by boat and came down the other side and met his wife on the far side. Either he didn't want to pay $1 or was afraid of going in the drink. Okay. So this is that suspension bridge, and I was just talking to Justin out there on the deck. He's also an expert on the bridges over Niagara Gorge, and he's taken groups for the State Parks Department on tours of this area, and they've looked at some of the remnants of the foundations from some of these early bridges. This one was slightly closer to the falls than the Rainbow Bridge is today, a few hundred yards. Okay. Now, the first real bridge to cross the gorge would be the one that was started by the Ellet group, but ended up in the hands of the bridge builder, Roebling, who built the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, this bridge would be built to carry railroad trains across. The bridge was pretty much the idea of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who, as you know, was the proprietor of the New York Central and other railroads. He was quite a tycoon. And so this was put across, it was about a mile down the river. It's just before it turns into the rapids. And they were concerned about suspension bridges and railroad trains because trains were fairly new at this time. They were afraid that if a train crossed a bridge, it wouldn't hold it. So when this bridge was eventually opened, it was built at 4 times the possible rate of trains at that day. But as trains increased in size, this bridge would eventually be modified. However, it still exists today, but not as a suspension bridge. But the deck and so on is still the original bridge, and we'll see a picture of that a little later. Okay. Here's another view of Roebling's suspension bridge. And see the trains on the upper deck and carriages and pedestrians on the lower deck. And the next picture. There's a view into the lower deck. Back in the day, wooden floor. Doesn't look a lot different from what it does today. If you have one of those special passes to cross this bridge, it's what would become the Whirlpool Rapids Bridge. Okay. Now, the trains on the upper deck, there was a single track. However, the problem was that 3 railroads were using it, and they had 3 different gauges. The New York Central would have 4 feet 8.5 inches as regular gauge width is even today. One of the other railroads had 5'6", and the third railroad had a 6-foot gauge width. So in order to accommodate them with only a single track bridge, there were 4 rails rather than 2, and they were spaced so that whatever train wanted to use the bridge could use the right pair of rails. Now later on, gauge was standardized between British Canada and America, because remember, there was no Canada back at that time. It was Upper Canada, as it was called. It would later on become Ontario. Okay. Now here's a picture of the bridge with a train crossing it. The bridge was so spectacular to tourists that people came from all over, not only to see the falls, but also to see the suspension bridge. Once the suspension bridge was proved for trains, that began a movement to build other railroad bridges of suspension type. Okay. Here's a later picture. This is a picture of the bridge in 1890. Now you'll notice that the towers that hold the bridge up are steel here. If you're going to go back a picture, see, these were made out of limestone, and they were fine for the weight of trains in the early days, but limestone, which Justin tells me may have come from what is now Bond Lake Quarry in Niagara County, it deteriorates after a period of time. Now this bridge, remember, was open in the 1850s, and this is, now let's go back to the next one. Go back to the one we had, yeah. No, the one before that. The one here. No, yeah, that one. Yeah, all you have to do is this. Okay, the towers were replaced by steel. Now, some of the earliest bridges had wooden towers, then limestone, and then steel. Because remember, steel was not practical until the Bessemer process was developed in Pennsylvania in the 1850s or 60s, somewhere around that time. So once the Bessemer process had been proven, they could move from iron to steel construction. But you can see by this train, open-end passenger cars, and not a lot of development around the bridges quite at that time. Okay. Here we are in 1945, and by this time, the suspension bridge was replaced partially by a steel arch, but the decks are the same decks that were built in the original rolling bridge, except everything was strengthened more. So they put the arch under it, and then they took the suspension part down. Okay. Now, the next bridge to look at, excuse me, was this first Falls View Bridge. People wanted a view of the falls. They were entranced by the view of the falls from a bridge. They could see it better. And they were using that Whirlpool Rapids Bridge. But the idea came to put a bridge closer to the falls. So this is where this was set up, just a short distance down from the falls. And this is a Currier and Ives picture, but the next picture shows the bridge better. Okay. No, go back one. Isn't there a color picture? No, I guess not. I thought I had a color picture of it in there. Well, anyway, here's one of the timber towers that were built up for the bridge. It was a very narrow bridge, had a wooden deck, and it was only 10 feet wide. And so at the time, people could only go one way across it or back. There was a bell at each end of the bridge. They'd ring the bell when it was time, kind of like a traffic light on a one-way highway where you have to wait while it's red and go when it's green. Well, this was good for a while, but it was creating quite a jam at each end with people waiting to cross the bridge until a pedestrian or a carriage crossed it one way, and they had to wait till they could get back the other way. Okay, next one. One of the things they did with this bridge was enclose the towers at the end, the wooden towers, weather-wise, and they built an elevator on the Canadian end. The elevator would take people up to the upper level, and then there's a stairway that would take you to the very top where they could see the falls from a heightened view. It, however, was not that successful financially, and so when they rebuilt the bridge, next picture, well, wait, I'll just show you this one. It was rebuilt here with a steel tower, and when they rebuilt the bridge, they made the deck 17 feet wide so you could have two-way traffic. Okay. There was a problem with that bridge. In 1888, I think it was, there was a brutal windstorm. And one of the things they had done to that bridge was to enclose the sides with low sheet metal and wood, and that made it safer. But it also, like that bridge out in Tacoma, Washington in the 1930s, I think it was, the wind would get it swaying back and forth. The last person to cross the bridge was a doctor who had been called to a patient on the other side of the bridge. When he came back that night, the bridge was going to so swaying, he thought he was going to die. He made it, but he claimed it was swaying 20 feet each direction. But he scared the bejeebers out of him anyway. So they would, excuse me, that was the second bridge. This would be the third bridge at that location. And what happened at the second bridge was that the wind came to the point in the middle of the night, 3:30 a.m., the cable snapped and the bridge went into the river on the ice. But today it's about 150 feet below and under the water. So this bridge comes along next. We're Upper Steel Arch Bridge. Okay. This is the bridge that is commonly called the Honeymoon Bridge. This Upper Steel Arch Bridge was built with the idea that it would be permanent and at least for a century or so. And it was wider, and they collected tolls on it. As they had, the early tolls were quite reasonable, about 10 cents. Now, let's take a look at the next one. You can see here's a good view of the bridge showing a trolley car and pedestrians on, because a great gorge route, trolley route was established in the 1890s. And you could take a trolley, let's say you'd board it here at the American end of this bridge. The trolley would take you across the bridge, turn left and go down to the, what is it? I can't remember the name of what it's called now, but anyway, a view down there on the Canadian side. And then it would turn around and come back and go down all the way along the Niagara Gorge as far as Queenston. If you've ever been on the bicycle path, you know, there's a steep drop down there. You gotta be careful, your bike has good brakes. But that's where the trolleys went down, and then they made an abrupt 180-degree turn and went across the Lewis and Queenston Bridge that I will show in a little while here. And then it looped around in Lewiston and then went along at water level, or near water level, on the American side, and then took an inclined route up to the top of the gorge again when it would be back at the American side where we began. But this shows one of the trolleys there, and it shows the bridge. There was, however, a fatal flaw when this bridge was built, and that is its footings. Its footings are awful close to water level. As you know, occasionally they get a lot of ice down there. Let's go to the next one. Here's another view of the bridge that was on the first slide, the 1919 view. Okay. Now, in 1937, 38 winter, the ice began to build up, as it has even since a couple times. And it began to put pressure on that bridge. Next one. They worked at trying to get the ice away from the footings, but there was an unsuccessful attempt. This was a quick photo somebody took, but the ice was more powerful than the people who were trying to remove it. Okay. And there she goes. Was anybody here around at that time? Aha! I saw them nodding their heads over there. You were.
What's the name of this bridge?
There was a reporter named Frank O'Seed who had hung around the bridge because with all the groaning and creaking of the bridge from the ice pressure, people knew that something was going to happen. Most of the other reporters there had gone in for coffee because of a cold day. Frank Seed stood there and he was able to get this picture. Real scoop. Okay. And there she is. This is a view from the Canadian side as the bridge fell down onto the ice. And the ice was there pretty much through April of 1938. They tried to salvage it for its material value, but unfortunately, you hit the next one too. Unfortunately, this is from the American side. Unfortunately, the ice broke up and the bridge, some parts are saved. In fact, they're on exhibit up in Niagara Falls, but most of it is down at the bottom of the gorge. Okay. So from 1938 to 1941, there was no bridge. And there was a steel shortage. Remember, in 1939, Canada was part of the British Commonwealth, and they were supporting Britain against the Luftwaffe over in England. And so all steel was going into tanks and buildings and, well, not so much of buildings, but tanks and airplanes. In fact, there was such a shortage of steel that one of the bombers produced in Canada, the Mosquito bomber, was built out of plywood and was used successfully in World War II, flying out of Britain. But without a bridge, we're not ready yet, without a bridge, the tourist business dropped off. So there was a priority set to replace this bridge with another bridge. Okay, now, and there you notice the footings going up for the present Rainbow Bridge. And as you can see, the footings are much higher. Here's the old bridge's footings here, and there's the present ones. Now there's the falls. That's where the other bridge was. It ran over to Clifton, and this current bridge here. Okay, next. Here they're building it. In case you can't read it from back there, Bethlehem Steel Company. And what you were seeing before was this here. So by 1941, the new bridge was open. Okay, next. There's a good picture of it. Later on, after the war, the Carillon Tower was added to the bridge on the Canadian side. Okay. I always liked this picture of the Rainbow Bridge. In fact, I put that in my Buffalo Niagara Connections book. It's one of the pictures in there of the current bridge. Okay, next. Now, the Cantilever Bridge. This was built in the 1880s. This is a picture taken about 1890. Cantilever Bridge is built, this part built out from these towers and over here, and then are connected by the truss bridge in the middle. And it was very popularly designed, excuse me, for railroads in the 19th and early 20th century. So this was put up next to the Whirlpool Rapids Bridge or Suspension Bridge. Let's get the next picture. In order to prove that it was strong enough, they put 10 locomotives together. Now they did one first, but they did eventually 10 of them across there like this, and it held. And it would be there next to the Whirlpool Rapids Bridge for the next 40 years. Okay, in fact, you could see in this picture here, there's the original Roebling Bridge, and here's the Cantilever Bridge. By the way, if you've never been down here for the walk along the gorge route on the Canadian side, That's a great place to visit. Okay. These are the lower rapid bridges again. Again, there's the Cantilever Bridge. And by this time, they have built the arch under the Roebling Bridge. Okay. This is an interesting picture because it shows the replacement for the Cantilever Bridge. This is the Roebling Bridge. This is the new bridge going up, which is called the Michigan Central Railroad Bridge. And this is the old Cantilever Bridge, which will be taken down after they get this one finished. This is the Great Gorge route I was telling you about before. The trolleys went up on the same route that President William McKinley traveled the day in the morning that he was shot in the afternoon. Okay. This is a view of the railroad yards here that would feed these two bridges, the Michigan Central Bridge here, then which would go down here, and the Roebling Bridge. And down here, of course, is the Honeymoon Bridge. This is from, I believe, 1926. There was a little airport out here in the town of Tonawanda, at the corner of Eggert Road and Niagara Falls Boulevard. It was the Curtis Airport. It was the first Buffalo airport. When the current Buffalo Airport was built in 1926, it was replaced. But anyway, there were men called Ronnie and Washburn who did aerial photography. Excuse me. And Washburn had a big camera, and he took pictures all over western New York from the air in an old Curtis Jenny airplane. This is one of his pictures. Okay, next one. Now, the first bridge at Lewis and Queenston, nobody knew anything about until fairly recently because it didn't last very long, as you can see. But it started from the same place as the next Lewis and Queenston Bridge down the base of Lewiston, and it went across. It was Queenston over here, and then I went up the hill. But it was not terribly strong. And when the wind came along, they thought maybe when the wind was fierce, it would be better to loosen the cables. So they loosened the cables, and next picture shows us what happened, only an art of conception. Photography was still fairly new at that point. So that's 3 bridges now we've seen that have fallen in the river. Okay. Most of you probably remember the Lewis and Queenston Bridge that lasted until 1962. I know because my mother's side was in Canada, we crossed this bridge a lot. Came down from Lewis, and it went basically across the same route. Before that, after the other bridge had collapsed, the only way to cross there was by boat. And as you know, the Niagara River is rather capricious. Notice there are trolley tracks. That's part of the Great Gorge route. And there's a trolley. Okay. Here's a view of it from above Brock's Monument here. There's the bridge. You had to get down here, make a quick turn. Although one year we were crossing the bridge with my grandmother from Canada. It was during the McCarthy era, the 1950s, I guess it was. When she was at the customs booth, I don't know what she did, but they hauled her in for an inquisition, actually. they thought she had some communist ties. Now this is an 80-year-old woman who had done nothing but raise 8 children and keep her husband going. I remember my father was furious. My father always had a short temper anyway. I thought he was going to kill somebody there. She finally got free, but that was a notorious place that we always remembered after that. That's also the same place my mother had a little trouble all the way at the other end of the bridge on the Canadian bridge. My mother immigrated here from Canada in 1924. I still have her immigration papers. Well, she carried them with her most of the time. First time she crossed the bridge without the papers, she tried to bluff her way through, eh? They suspected she was not an American citizen, said, all right, tell us, who was the first president of the United States? Oh, she said, Abraham Lincoln. Nailed. Well, she thought she learned after that. The next time she crossed the bridge without her papers, it said, and she was all set. She knew all the presidents by then. What's the last 3 letters of the alphabet? She says, XYZ. Well, she always carried her papers after that. Okay. Yeah. This is a rather rare picture having both the Lewis and Queenston Bridge and the Queenston-Lewiston Bridge in the same picture. This is 1962 that they stopped traffic on this bridge and opened this one. This is shortly thereafter. And of course we have the power projects in here now also. So let's see, this would be a view. This is the Moses Power Project here. And this is Sir Adam Beck over here. Okay, next one. Better picture, similar location from that last one, only a little upstream. And there we are with the bridge as it looked in 1963. Okay, and that is it. The bridges. Sorry I can't come up with any more bridges, but thank you for your attendance, and I'm open to any questions if anybody has it.